I think people think there's a real vulnerability here and
Alan
there's a real
Keyes?
chance to win. Alan Keyes, sure. Yes, sir.
You didn't talk about this group in your lecture, but I wanted to know, like, how do you feel about the Tea Party movement? Like, do you think like that whole entire movement would help or hurt like Republicans in 2010 and look a little farther ahead in 2012?
Oh, look, I'm a big fan of the Tea Party movement because I believe that, I'm a student of social reform movements and political movements. I mean, that was what I studied when I was in graduate school, and whether it's the suffragist movement or the anti-slavery movement or the progressive movement or the populist movement or the civil rights movement or the pro-family movement, which I'm most identified with, or the anti-war movement of the 60s, I just think that democracy is healthier and we're better off if more and more citizens are involved and are holding politicians of both parties to account. And I do think that both parties, the Democrats more so clearly, but Republicans too. As I said earlier in talking about the entitlements, we're not making the tough decisions. Our political system is not dealing with the hard-nosed reality of the fact that we are making promises to future beneficiaries of government programs that we cannot pay and that we actuarially know we will never be able to pay. If you did this as a private insurance company, if you sold people policies and promised them benefits, knowing that your reserves were $50 trillion in the hole, you'd be doing a perp walk. But that's what Washington does every day. And I think the Tea Party folks are demanding an answer. They're demanding that this be dealt with. And, we'll see what happens and how they vote. I think in the 90s, when I was at the Christian Coalition, the analog to this was the Thoreau movement. And they were not Republican or Democrat. They were, it was sort of a pox on both your houses. They were for term limits, they were for balanced budgets, they were for congressional reform. In '94, our candidates got about 2 out of every 3 votes of a 1992 Perot voter. And I think that's probably a fair indicator of how the Tea Party vote will break out. Probably 2-to-1 Republican in 2010. But, we'll see. Yes. Yes, ma'am, in the green.
How do you mentioned earlier about the tent expanding, and you mentioned women as a constituency that the Republican Party is to gain control over, at least get a few more votes. How do you propose Republicans do that? Do you think it's certain issues? Do you think there's certain candidates, or what do you propose that they do?
I think it's both. I think that we need to recruit and run more women candidates. And, I've already talked about how I think Hillary got a bum rap. I think Sarah Palin got a bum rap. She made mistakes during the campaign. She's acknowledged that. She said the Katie Couric interview was not her best day at the office. But I'll tell you this. I thought she did fine in the debate with Joe Biden. And I can tell you this, if you talk to people in the Obama campaign about who caused more trouble for the ticket with gaffes and mistakes and saying things like, in an on-the-record interview, I'm more qualified to be president than my running mate. Joe Biden had far more gaffes on the campaign trail than Sarah Palin did. I frankly think there's a double standard in the way women candidates are treated on the campaign trail in these areas, and I don't think it's common, by the way, just to the United States. I think it happens in political systems around the world. So we clearly need more women candidates. And I think on issues, an agenda that speaks to women's concerns about education, about taxes, about jobs, and about the economy. If you look at all the polling, those are the issues that they're most concerned about. In the '04 campaign, we used to call these security moms. Remember, we used to talk about soccer moms. By '04, they were concerned primarily about 3 things. Number 1, job security and economic security. Number 2, national security. They're very sensitive about protecting the homeland and making sure that we're safe from a tax on our home soil, and thirdly, health security. And that's why I said that Republicans have to have a plan for all these areas. Yes, sir.
I think both parties can agree that entitlement programs are going to become the biggest problem facing the country. One of the only real steps towards a solution I've heard is raising the retirement age. Mm-hmm. How do you think that can happen in the United States, especially given how organized the AARP and other organizations are?
Well, look, in fairness to those who are in elective office, it's not as if this hasn't been tried. Okay? George W. Bush doesn't get a lot of credit for this, but he devoted almost the entire first year of his second term trying to come up with a solution for the long-term fiscal insolvency of Social Security. He appointed a bipartisan commission headed by former Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Richard Parsons, who was then the CEO of Time Warner. It was an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. And they proposed a number of ideas. They didn't endorse any one. One of them was raising the retirement age. Another one was allowing a portion of personal taxes to be invested in a retirement account. And there were a number of others. And Bush was not able to get this legislation to move. So it's not as if it hasn't been tried. Unfortunately, I fear that it will not really be dealt with until the savings and loans debacle was dealt with in the 90s, until the threat of radical Islamic terrorism was dealt with after September 11th, and until the problem of these exotic financial instruments like collateralized debt obligations and derivatives and mortgage-backed securities that helped to create the financial crisis of the fall of 2008. Sadly, democracies are not real good at dealing with problems until they are on top of them and have reached a crisis level. Now, I will say that once that crisis has arrived, democracies are very good at tackling them. Winston Churchill, who was a great friend of this country, once said that the American people, once awoken from their slumber, will fight with great intensity. And that's kind of the way we are. You come to us now and you say Medicare is going to go broke in 2035, we go, oh, okay, come and see us then. So I don't know when that's going to come. Yes, sir.
It seems like there's a lot of anger that's, that the American people have towards directed towards both parties, even Republicans still, despite the fact that Democrats are, hearing a lot of anger from the public. Do you think it's possible that a legitimate third-party candidate will, emerge in 2012, kind of like what happened with Ross Perot? Is that like a reality, and could that split the Republican base, possibly?
I think if you look at I don't remember which poll it was, if it was Rasmussen or somebody else, but somebody did a poll, I think in January of this year, where they asked people, would they vote Republican, Democrat, or for a Tea Party candidate in 2010? And I'm doing this from memory, so I'm probably going to get it wrong. But my recollection is it was 36% Democrat, 23% Tea Party, and I think 18% Republican. So if you combine the Tea Party and Republican vote, it was a majority. But if they both ran, you split the vote and the Democrat won. My sense is that that's a little bit of what happened with Perot. We'll never know. But if Perot had not run, my sense is that the 92 election at a minimum would have been a lot closer than it was. I wrote a political novel in 2008 about the first, it's called Dark Horse, and it's about the first independent presidential candidate to ever win the White House. And I won't ruin the story. You can go on Amazon and get it. But it's a fun read. But the reason why I had to write about it in fiction is because it doesn't really happen in real life. Probably the strongest person to ever run for president